So tonight's lecture is Dr. Chris Beck, who's the Group Director of Clean Growth and Innovation with the Tees Valley Combined Authority. He's going to talk to us about net zero.
Yeah, take through next year what's happening in Teesside.
So if you just bear with me 1 second, I'll just set the PowerPoint up and then I'll leave you in the hands of Chris.
This lecture can take anything from 2 to 3 hours, depending on how many questions are asked. So we'll aim to finish. I'll rattle through and I'll take as many questions as you like. So apologies for my boss, Julie Gillespie, who's not here tonight. She saw the word engineering and then I got kicked in as the technically engineering director. This isn't going to click, so you need the... Yeah, should go. Okay, so I don't need to tell everybody in this room where the Tees Valley is, perfectly located where it is. And I really don't need to tell you why this place is a great place to invest. But just to pick out a couple of points, just what we talk to people. Deepest port on the east coast of England. I'm very careful with my wording. Some of the people might be a little bit looser on that. But we have access to about 2.5 million people in just over an hour's drive. That is the mayor's driving, not mine. That does include the speeding ticket, I'm sure. But what it says is, it's quite an interesting fact that I think if you go into Newcastle, we've got access to more people here in an hour, because north of Newcastle, not sheep. South of here is York, and the outskirts of Leeds. Right, so net zero, what's it mean for Tees Valley? Well, it's all driven by what we do with government strategy. So as you know, the government announced a 10-point plan, which is then changed rapidly in April 2022. So, we've had a few governments since this was done, so it may change again. But officially, as of today, we have a target of 50 gigawatts of offshore wind. Problem is, everybody else in the world now has a huge target for offshore wind, so that's going to be challenging. We have a target of 10 gigawatts of low carbon hydrogen by 2030. That's only going to be possible with carbon capture and storage. We have a plan to capture 10 million tonnes of carbon dioxide from carbon capture and storage in 2 industrial clusters. I'll come on to why 2 looks like 3. Accelerate the shift on transport. As you know, your cars have to be zero emission by 2030. We'll talk a little bit about that. Making buildings more efficient and phasing out fossil fuel boilers. I'll come on to that a little bit, the strategy on that and what may or may not work, but very quick little bit. Unleashing innovation. Significant accelerate nuclear power to 24 gigawatts. These are government targets, not Tees Valley targets. But it affects the Tees Valley because it's one of the few places virtually all of this can be delivered. So I'm going to talk tonight mainly about the Tees Valley, the investments that are coming on, the heavy industry, and the play on that.
Do you mind just moving closer to the laptop so they can hear you?
Well, I might have to move a bit closer because this isn't going to click. Like, so whatever you've done, you've... Bring back Sue.
Oh, yes, please. Yeah.
Right, try again. I think we just moved off PowerPoint.
Yeah. How to decarbonise? Right, so for the Tees Valley, this is Tees Valley now. Carbon capture, use and storage. Why don't we use it all? Because we're capturing far too much. Hydrogen economy. You cannot decarbonise the Tees Valley just using carbon capture. You have to go with hydrogen as well. Renewable electricity, sort the infrastructure out, and then start looking at carbon displacement. So that is basically the region's plan and activity to get to net zero. So some numbers, and pick them through. I'm looking around and say, so household emissions, Tees Valley against the UK, slightly under. It's quite nice. We've got a slight problem with our industrial emissions. They're 6 times higher than the national average. No surprise there. Transport's under. Other sectors, commercial. Our total emissions per capita are double the national average. It would have been, that's fine, because that gives me a day job to sort out. And it's all down to industry. Would have been a lot worse. There is one way to decarbonise, and we did it in 2015. We halved our emissions. We also lost 3,000 jobs and put ourselves into crisis. It is not viable. That is an interesting emissions graph of where you are with the Tees Valley. And We all can plot when things happened, when things first closed, opened up again, closed again, and then came back. What's interesting with the investment we're seeing, that line is due to grow back to 9 to 10 million tonnes, or even higher if I get a few more investments in the next few weeks. So if we don't do anything, we're going to go back to where we were as an emitter. I just put this in, we don't talk about emissions just to bring it home. When the steelworks closed, we don't often see a big drop in unemployment. Everybody clapped about it. Now you look back, our growth rate was, you look at the growth rate compared to the rest of the UK, top graph, we fell further behind and the gap fell further. And you can now look back and see the GDP went off a cliff. Closing the steelworks is not a good idea for an economic development agency like us.
Since more than 2,000 steelworkers lost their jobs last month, this huge site has become almost deserted.
Overnight, the full family was literally out of work.
It was every man for themselves, and it was just a case of travelling out the area. There was nothing really local.
We're expecting any moment a declaration, which will be that Ben Houchin, the Conservative candidate, will be the first elected mayor for the Tees Valley.
I'm very pleased to see the launch of the South Tees Development Corporation. It's the first mayoral development corporation outside Greater London. I think there is huge potential here. There's huge potential in the site I've been visiting today. It will take time, but it's important for future jobs and sustainable jobs here in the Tees Valley.
A deal that's being hailed as a new dawn for this old site.
Today, I can announce the 8 Freeport locations in England. East Midlands Airport, Felixstowe and Harwich, Humber, Liverpool City Region, Plymouth, Solent, Thames and Teesside. Yeah.
$750 jobs and possibly thousands more in the supply chain as SEER has committed to manufacturing monopiles here for decades to come. They're expecting to produce 150 monopiles a year when in operation, putting Teesside on the map when it comes to the wind energy industry. Michael, an apprentice, and Paul, a former steelworker at this site, are excited about the job's future in Teesside.
When I look to the future of Teesside, I see old industrial sites being used to capture and store carbon, vaccines being manufactured, offshore wind turbines creating clean energy for the rest of the country, all located within a free port with a treasury just down the road and the UK Infrastructure Bank only an hour away. I see innovative, fast-growing businesses hiring local people into decent, well-paid green jobs. I see people designing, manufacturing and exporting incredible new products and services. I see people putting down roots in places they are proud to call home. I see a people optimistic and ambitious for their future. That, Madam Deputy Speaker, is the future economy of this country.
Take that just to put into context where we came from. In 2015, if you think about it, we had a chemical, petrochemical, for future petrochemicals, dying. It was dying. This is another exciting project. How do we then start looking at homes? Homes are a very controversial political issue. There's a lot of lobby groups out there. I personally believe the right technology will come for the right home, and it gives us a voice. Not political, there's no political statement in that. And from there, that's the decision we have to move forward. And what we're seeing regenerating in this region is not to go back to petrochemicals and not to go back to steel, but to go back to the next revolution, which is building on our heritage of heavy manufacturing and power manufacturing, but all about green, net zero, recycling, and the future. So we'll go through where that's going. So, let's go through. Where are we? You know, like the emissions, we have a great port, we're used to handling chemicals, we've got a lot of power, and we have a lot of emissions. So it's a great place to start doing net zero tenders. This is another exciting project. How do we then start looking at homes? Homes are a very controversial political issue. There's a lot of lobby groups out there. I personally believe the right technology will come for the right home. That's all it is for us. Right. It's not just about emissions. We have to consider two things as well. We've got to keep our current businesses going and growing, and we have to create economic opportunities for our residents. So our route to net zero is not just carbon reduction, it has to be about economic opportunities. We need to create jobs. It's no good, I can close everything down and get to my targets. If we don't create jobs, tenders. So, net zero strategy going through TCA Cabinet in the next couple of months. It's built on 5 pillars. Heavy industry, we have an energy cluster, industry, residential, transport centres. This is another exciting project. How do we then start looking at homes? Homes are a very controversial political issue. There's a lot of lobby groups out there. I personally believe the right technology will come for the right home, so that it actually makes economic sense. Right, you know the region, don't have to tell you all, it's made up of 2 companies, integrated clusters. So chemicals, Teesworks, steelwork, port, pipes. If you're looking for a CCS project, you've got pipeways that are there, 200. The CCS project needs 20 miles of onshore pipes. Doing it in whole Europe tenders. And those pipes mainly have existing rights of way. That's why this region was chosen by the major oil companies and energy companies as the best place in the world to start doing this. Just put that tenders. Putting the cluster, because we always like to talk about other things going on, but let me pick a few up relevant to net zero go through. Mitsubishi Chemicals, electrolytes, Johnson Matthey, hydrogen. You're already seeing a lot of recycling going on in Wilton and the plastic recycling. SABIC getting their crack around and going on to different things. A lot of biomass. We'll come on to that one. And this is the government, this is how the government sees emissions from clusters. Date, but that's what everything is built on government policy. And since we've got 8.8 there instead of our current emissions, we're just sticking with it. Right. So when we start looking at things, this is how we believe we can get a route to net zero for Tees Valley. It's based on three things. First one is carbon capture and storage. Without it, we can't get there. We just can't do it. The carbon capture and storage in itself will not decarbonise the cluster. This is another exciting project. How do we then start looking at homes? Homes are a very controversial political issue. A lot of lobby companies will either directly connect to the carbon capture or they will fuel switch. If they want to fuel switch, you need bulk hydrogen, therefore you strip the carbon out and pump the hydrogen around. Or they go electric. So hydrogen is a key part of it. As we go through, key projects are both blue hydrogen, which is where you obviously connect steam methane reformer, advanced methane reformer into carbon capture, but also green tenders. Interesting to see how many companies are insisting on green hydrogen. The closer they are to the customer, the more that they're prepared to pay the premium for green hydrogen. 3 big green hydrogen projects going on. BP, 0.5 gigawatt, Protium, 600 megawatts and growing, and also EDF, which haven't written up their tenders. This is another exciting project. How do we then start looking at homes? Homes are a very controversial political issue. A lot of lobby group, and it's going to take the furnaces in Lackenby into hydrogen. Why? Because people are paying a premium for low carbon steel. The world has changed, and we need to take that opportunity. The third bit everybody sometimes forgets is power. Wind power is the answer to everything. No. Wind power is great when the wind blows. What the carbon capture net zero project, net zero Teesside project is, it's a carbon capture project connected to a gas station. But the gas-fired power station is a peaker plant and it burns when the wind isn't blowing. So instead of having wind resource, you now have a power resource that makes sense and is stable. And that is big play. We've also got Whitetail, which is on the St. Paul Wilton site. And then there's tenders. This is another exciting project. How do we then start looking at homes? Homes are a very controversial political issue. A lot of lobby groups are trying to direct air capture, carbon capture from the air. Said, I just get a plant to do that for me. Then I take the plant and burn it or process it into a product. If I then capture the carbon from that product and send it into CCS, I took the carbon out of the air. We think of it that way. It puts a different spin. I'm not arguing for biomass or for or against. I'm just picking up how we get on. And we need negative emissions if we're going to get to net zero as a country. So we have a cluster plan. It's been about £1 million put into it by Innovate UK. It's been running for currently 2 years. It's interesting when we started, we had to corral and bribe and force companies into a room. Now they're knocking on the door. The world has changed so much in the 3 years we've been working on this. This is another exciting project. How do we then start looking at homes? Homes are a very controversial political issue. A lot of work through, obviously confidential to each one, and there's a number of consultancies in the area. We keep talking about economics and I'll pick that up. What's really interesting on this is the number of consultancies that are in the area now, growing, and the jobs that are coming on around them. And that's showing our economy is starting to come back to life. It's not just the big plants, it's everything support services. Cluster makeup, drivers, what's driving your score vendors, carbon taxes, your regulation. You then have to look at your scope 2 and 3 emissions, your supply chain. What we're seeing from a lot of people now is they're insisting their suppliers look at their own suppliers down multiple levels, all the way back down to source for emissions vendors. This is another exciting project. How do we then start looking at homes? Homes are a very controversial political issue. There's a lot of lobby groups out there. I personally believe the right technology will come for the right home. So new homes will probably be electric heating. So ground zero for net zero. BP project, right? No. It's Shell, ADNOC, a major sponsor of it now, Equinor involved in it, ENR tenders. All about going to offshore. So only in the UK can BEIS run a competition where we're going to have 2 clusters connected to an offshore wind. And the picture behind me looks like two clusters. No, that's one. We wanted two different stores. So one is HyNet in the northwest, right into a depleted gas field. This is to a saline aquifer. But because between Hull and Middlesbrough, Teesside, East Valley, we are 50% of the youth vendors. You have to do them both. So they decided Hull and Teesside were the same place when it comes to carbon capture and storage. Just a little quirk on what we're doing. There's some information on the store. There's 450 million tonnes of CO2 can be stored in that store. BP confirmed yesterday with the assistant stores near it, they can get to 1 gigaton. It's a hell of a lot of storage. Teesside, one vendors. This is another exciting project. How do we then start looking at homes? Homes are a very controversial political issue. There's a lot of lobby groups out there. I personally believe the energy opportunities, you already know, Hornsey and Dogger Bank are landing their wind power here. Massive opportunities, EDF, battery storage at Wilton, and lots of thermal power plants coming online. And even more as we start looking at energy to waste waste to energy plants, but also waste to product plants as well. We've got 2 to 3 waste to energy plants. We've got more processing of waste than we've got waste. We bring in, now when I get a project, they go, we're waste to products. I say, great, where's your waste from? Are we going to see the council? Goodbye. That was signed up years ago and signed up for decades. So Teesside site, I call it Steelworks site, CIE. You know about it and put it through there, and that's where it is. I just wanted to pick up where net zero is, where the CCS pipe's going and straight out, and you'll see hydrogen production near that. But also, what is also interesting when we talk about regeneration and jobs, it's offshore wind. That's where South Bank comes into play. And that's something that we're playing through. So South Bank is earmarked for offshore wind manufacturing. That's where the UK Infrastructure Bank's first investment is being made for £107 million for new offshore wind quay. Supposed to be 2 built in the UK. Only one's currently being built and it'll be finished next year. That quay was the reason why we managed to land SEA. SEA is such a big factory, it took up more land than any was expecting. We hope to announce in the next few months what's next to it. Again, an offshore wind and great opportunities on that. The land's filling up quickly, and that's good to see. Our job now is to make sure that the local residents get access to those jobs, both during construction now, so they get impact now. It's always jammed tomorrow, isn't it, at Teesside? But as you see those things going up, and you will see them from the road, it's a 40-metre high building. We've got to make sure residents get access on that. And just the remediation, Dorman Point was a mess, whoever left it in that mess from the steelworks. They found locomotives under there, they found rolling mills, they found all nasties. The land gets better as you go out towards a newer blast furnace. You're laughing, it's awful. But how they remediated the land, got to be careful, Environment Agency sitting there. You dig it out, you take out the main nasties, but then you blend it. What did they blend it with? Well, there was a tunnel being built from the National Park by Anglo-American mudstone. So you take the mudstone, you take the slag, you blend it together, you get the right expansion mix, you put the thing back in. What you're doing is you're not sending lots of things to landfill. You try to use it locally and rebuild it locally. At the end of the day, it's all reclaimed land anyway. So it's just reclaiming land. Maybe not to standard build houses on it, but definitely good enough for industry. And there's the flat plains that build. It used to be fun driving around site. We could go on site, scare the birds, take the Land Rovers up on top of the site and show people. Now they're all the builders on site, it's all safe, it's driving around in cars and the stairs. But you don't redevelop the whole site, you have to do it as industry comes on. So you develop a site, you build it, you go on. And so the SEA, there's the site going on there. All those structures there that you all can probably name are gone. The only things left on site now are around the blast furnace. And the blast furnace will be down shortly. It's just changed again. But the SEA site, 40-metre high. Each one of those monopiles is bigger than a World War II destroyer. And I can tell you, because it's now UK content for UK offshore wind, SEA are now reaping the rewards of that risk investment that they've made. And they are working hard to really make that a success. So I look forward to seeing the welders going in with my background. Right, hydrogen. Why hydrogen here? We have storage caverns. It's not rough storage, but it's as in rough as in the storage under the sea. The rough site, I need to change it. But we do have storage caverns. Yes, they need relining, a lot of them. We produce a lot of hydrogen. We're used to doing it. We pump it around already. We're not into that word. We've also come on to what we're doing with the DFT. Right. We've talked a lot about putting hydrogen into industry. Talked about whether it's blue or green. Each company will decide. There's a number of people going on. It will come down to price and what your market really wants you to do. Whether you go electric, gas, or direct carbon capture will decide on your process and where you are on your process side. But because we have a hydrogen economy and hydrogen going on, we managed to win for the region the DFT transport hub. So as we decarbonise, yes, we're investing in electric cars, but now we're doing this. So you'll start seeing some electric fueling stations, hydrogen fueling stations being built in the region. There's a couple of bids in now to see that go through. More trials, more airport operations. Are we going to use electric? Are we going to hydrogen? The market will decide. My own personal opinion, heavy goods vehicles, probably more hydrogen. Some of the buses, probably hydrogen because of their cycles. Some will be electric. Cars, probably more electric, the range extenders. This is another exciting project. How do we then start looking at homes? Homes are a very controversial political issue. There's a lot of lobby groups out there. I personally believe the right technology will come for the right home. So new homes will probably be electric heating. You build them and design them for heat pumps. That makes sense. You cannot use a heat pump in a lot of the housing stock in the Tees Valley without having to spend an absolute fortune insulating it, which we can't afford to do as a nation. So we have to have the right technology or the interim technology bring them through. And that's where hydrogen comes in. So I can say that part of Redcar is bidding against another part of the UK to be the UK trial where we convert 2,000 houses over to hydrogen. Northern Gas Networks are looking at that. Why that's really exciting is you then start seeing the symbiosis of the industrial network feeding into the network here. And then you start looking at the safety requirements. You could put up to 20% of hydrogen into the existing gas network, they think, without having to do anything. Yes, it's not got the same energy density and it doesn't have 20% reduction in emissions, but it starts taking percentage points off. It's like everything else with decarbonisation. Let's do what we can now. Let's do what we can to make a difference and then keep getting better and better. I use the example of the milk tops that they've announced. You're losing your green milk tops and your red milk tops. They're going clear because it's easier to recycle that plastic. I can live with that. It's not putting the price of my milk up. I don't like milk, so I don't care. But we go through. So we could see hydrogen going to homes. So ask me again Easter next year whether we won or not. Right. We bought an airport. When you're trying to decarbonise, that's sort of like not a good thing to do. It's a very good thing to own the airport. We love the airport. It's not going to close. We're not going into that discussion. If I'm trying to decarbonise, but actually it's been a positive thing. So the airport has been a great place to try a lot of the airport low carbon vehicles and testing. And that's building links around the world, people coming to look, and the guy's doing a great job there. What it's really driven is sustainable aviation fuel production. Because do you know an airport that wants to do trials that's near a chemical works? Hey guys. So we have 3 major SAF manufacturing projects looking to come into the area. One, making it from waste. I think it's actually the next slide. I'll skip to this. One, making it from waste. It's $1 billion investment. Everyone remember the Air Products plant, North Tees? Great success, never opened. Repurposing that to make aviation fuel. Absolutely brilliant. We also have another one that wants to use bio products to make aviation fuel, and another one that wants to do direct combination of CO2 and hydrogen to make fuel. Will they all work? Yes. Will they all be financially successful? Let's wait and see. But we'll see what goes through. What has been really interesting is the inward investment. We've talked about offshore winds come through. We've got the supply chain and the engineering coming through. The investment in the treasury is stimulating other things. But when you come to chemicals, it's on two things. It's plastic recycling and bio economy, bio waste to product. So you already know we make bioethanol. You've all seen that plant. Probably less known is how much biodiesel we make as a region. We make a lot of the UK's biodiesel already. And then the plant they're planning on putting in will be 5 times bigger. Absolutely amazing. Sustainable aviation fuel, I've talked about the major investments on that. Anybody know we made biocoal? Yeah. It was a new one to us when we drove past. Biosolar fuel. Yeah, absolutely brilliant thing. And then bio-LPG, a transition technology before you go to gas. But how do you decarbonise those houses that are off grid? So what we're really coming up here is the economics driving Teesside decarbonising it. And then again, waste to power. So many waste to power plants coming on is absolutely fantastic. Talk about Alphanar, circular fuels and biogas. And just to finish off, just to put up, there are other options to help us decarbonise. We can eat less meat, which means eating more corn. We can also keep you healthy by making vaccines, but also all the additional chemicals we make for the battery supply chains, the investments we're seeing in lithium hydroxide, the two that have been announced to come to Teesside on that. There's more supply chain working on that. We're talking significantly about copper recycling. There's a copper recycling now in Middlesbrough opened. I'm talking really at scale, and discussions with an aluminium recycling, then back to product. Absolutely fantastic. You know, there's one thing missing. We're now too, what we've really seen in Teesside as it talks up is that the economy is recovering, the land prices are going up, and it becomes a place that is really thriving. It makes it a little bit too expensive for large steelworks. About the only thing I haven't been able to put through when we're having this conversation. Just to finish off, let's go to net zero. Talk about connectivity. We need smart cities, we need smart connections. I find it's difficult to look at, so I hope you can all work out where the UK is now. It goes back to front for me. Did you know that there is a major worldwide internet connection that comes into Teesside and it's not lit up? And even worse, it goes into Steel House. Who knew? So there's a major investment going in that's been announced to connect that to that and put a major super fast fibre ring around the Tees Valley. So that means instead of sending your data to Leeds or Newcastle, it then goes straight out, and that saves so many fraction of a millisecond. But apparently, that's important for certain processes and data. So that's really coming through. But where it also makes it interesting, it gives us the opportunity to be a smart region. So we are talking to EV car manufacturers and plants to come in and do stuff. But we also announced with Densair a 5G network, not for your phones, but for industry. So you can start doing the smart connected things. So getting the base place in place. We're not Silicon Valley, but Teesside is one of the first places, Densair, along with New Zealand and North Carolina, where they're actually investing in putting this in. Not bad for a place that was on its knees in 2015. Natural capital, net zero strategy, very much focusing on our responsibility for nature, nature recovery, significant tree planting. It is important. It cannot be ignored. We have to play and do that. We have some issues. 18% of national parks in our area. I am trying to get more of it in, but they won't let me expand it. But we have to have, and we have a plan on that. Insulating homes and getting energy price down. We are doing work on that. It is difficult on two fronts. One, if you're doing a house in London and it's worth £1 million, spending 20k to insulate it sort of makes financial sense. You take exactly the same property in Teesside and it's worth £100,000 and that's being generous. It doesn't quite look as good on the benefit ratio. So we've had a lot of fights and arguments on that. And the cost of doing this is very high, but we are insulating quite a lot of homes and we are future bidding to try and get thousands of homes. So that work is going on. It's just as important. We've got to bring everybody through. So I showed you no Inca with our nature strategy. Chemical plants and processing plants do not have a big footprint. They can help out and they bring a lot of stuff through. And there's the wall of credit, the people that help pay towards that. Say to companies, if you're not on there, you need to get your checkbook out. The River Trust as well. Pick up a couple of other things. You know, we all talk about industry, but let's pick up some other things. Oyster nurseries, filtering seawater. If you like eating oysters, maybe want to think about your absolute great way for nature helping cleaning up and strip out stuff going through. Seagrass meadows, 30 times faster than the Amazon rainforest. So let's get them planted and really going. Let's get our intertidal habitat very much into our wetlands, our seals and our birds. It's so important that we coexist and bring through. So I always finish with this because it's something we did when we landed the Treasury. Most important, we talk about how we get to net zero and bring through. But in the Tees Valley, this is the government's own data, we all have a higher life satisfaction. We're all happier than the people elsewhere in the country, and our cost of living is significantly better. So when we knock ourselves down, let's be a little bit positive.